market update. So every single week I get to share a market update to share with you what's been happening in all the major markets here throughout Texas. And the way that I'll do it is I'll do the roll-up first of all of the Texas data. So last month, the average price was $446,000, up 17% versus where we were the same time last year. And it'd probably help if I showed you this, yeah. And I know this is another eye chart, but I'll highlight some of the things I want to make sure you guys are aware of. Last month in Texas, closed sales were down, but they were only down 1.8%. So again, get some perspective, pretty darn good. Total active listings, we are starting to increase the number of active homes on the market right now. And I think that number is going to continue to increase. Even though, but not probably at the level we need it to increase to dramatically reduce that growth in the average price. Typically, our average price growth has been somewhere between 5 and 6%, right, here in Texas. To be at 17% is really outside of the norm for us, but it's all based on that supply or lack thereof supply. For 2022, for the full year, as we're at the midpoint right now, sales volume I'm forecasting should be up somewhere between 1 to 3%. But guys, let me tell you something. Even if it's down 1 to 3%, it's still all going to be okay. This is one of the safest places to have your money. Average price up around 20% versus where we were in 2021. In the Houston market, the average price was up $441,000, up 14% year over year. Their sales were down last month, but Houston was actually the biggest of the 4 biggest markets. They were the one that were pulling up the curve in terms of the least reduction in year over year sales. And I think they're actually going to do really well this year because Houston is kind of countercyclical to just about all of the other markets. So when oil and gas is doing great and you're paying $5 plus a gallon, Houston is like partying in the streets, okay, literally, but all of the other markets, right, are feeling the pinch, right? So Houston typically does a little bit better, obviously, when some of the economic issues are hitting other parts of the market. Pending sales last month in Houston up 4%. And the forecast for Houston, sales up in the 5% range and the average price up in the 15 to 20% range. In San Antonio, the average price last month, $393,000, up 16%. The sales were down only 2%, but still down. And the pending sales are down versus the same time last year. The forecast for sales for San Antonio up 3%. You got to remember that sometimes when people are looking at saying, I want to move to Texas, what are one of the big things that they're saying? Where can I afford to move in Texas? And San Antonio is, along with Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, the 2 most affordable large counties in Texas. So I think we'll still see a lot more people moving there because their prices are still kind of that sub 400,000 point. In the Dallas and Fort Worth market, average price last month was $539,000, up 20% versus the same time last year. Closed sales were basically flat year over year. Pending sales are down 4%. Pending sales are our closest leading indicator to what closed sales will be next month. And our active listings up 26% in the DFW market, but that's still down by somewhere between 20 and 30 plus thousand listings versus where we were, for example, in 2019. So even though they're up and up significantly, still not anywhere near where we need to be. The forecast for sales in Dallas last year, they were actually down 1%. But that didn't stop that average price from increasing about 20% last year. So the forecast for sales for Dallas is going to be about flat year over year, which means they'll sell about 100,000 properties in that DFW market. The average price up and up somewhere between 18 and 20% year over year. For the Austin market, average price $683,000. American. I'm just saying, up 17% versus where Austin was the same time last year. Closed sales were down 6.7%, but look at that inventory increase. That is a triple-digit inventory increase. I want to say it was 144% higher than what we were the same time last year. Now, last year, every house had multiple offers above list price the same day it was listed, and in some cases sight unseen, because people couldn't get out of work to be able to go see it, and they just want to put in an offer to be able to get it. So the fact that we're at 4,000 active listings is not like, in the fact that we've increased by 144% is nothing to be worried about. So we went from about a 2-week supply of inventory, 0.5 months of inventory last year, to right now we only have a 1.2 month supply of inventory. I didn't address this earlier, but all of you guys are probably very familiar with the concept of days on market, how long it takes a property to, after it's put on the MLS, how long it takes. And many of you, for those of you who are new, you may think days on market is how long it takes to sell. The truth is it's how long it takes before it goes under contract, okay? The reason why they stop at the contracting phase is because the time to close could be 2 weeks if it's cash, or it could be 45 or more days if it's an FHA or VA type of a loan, right? So the concept you guys might not be familiar with is the concept and the statistic months of inventory. So months of inventory represents the amount of inventory that we have based on the current buyer demand, that if we stopped listing houses today, and in this case in Austin, in 1.2 months we would be completely out of an inventory of homes for sale based on the buyer demand that we've had over the last 12 months, averaged out, okay? Literally there was, we saw several months, probably about 10 months over the past year in Austin, where the number of active listings was less than the number of sold listings and was less than the number of pending listings. That's like an inverted yield curve for a real estate market, right? It's like so little inventory. So the fact that we have 4,200 listings in Austin, literally we could have 20 to 30,000 listings in Austin and it'd still be at a good spot in terms of months of inventory. So they say they say 6 months is our 40-year average in terms of the typical months of inventory that we have. So typically we're about 6 months of inventory. They say anything less than about 6 months of inventory is a seller's market. Anything more than 6 months of inventory is a buyer's market. So we have obviously been in a seller's market on steroids in Austin, but not just for the last 2 years. More for about the last 5 years we have been in a situation where we've not had enough inventory. So these are some interesting numbers that are coming up. And I do have this theory, and it is untested, but I do have this thought that, and I'm curious, how many of you guys are rental property owners right now? How many of you guys are rental property owners right now? Okay. How many of you guys are looking at your tax assessment and saying, oh my God, right? And you're saying, wow, how much am I going to have to raise my rent to be able to handle this, to be able to break even on that property? So I don't know if this is true, but I have a feeling that we'll see a lot more landlords who maybe bought 5 or 10 years ago a $200,000 to $300,000 house that are now looking at a $600,000+ house and are having a very difficult time figuring out how to cash flow here in Austin. And for probably 10 or 15 years, I've always said that cash flow in Austin, that's an oxymoron. Like, those things don't go together. And it's even more so the case. So I'm imagining that, and I'll just poll you guys who have said, like, you own rental property. Would you raise your hand if you're considering selling it now because of the property taxes? Okay, none of you guys. Okay, that's awesome. I've been investing for almost 2 decades. My mom actually started, my parents started investing in Austin and Dripping Springs in the early 90s, okay, early 90s. So, my parents have properties that they bought for $100 that are now worth like $1.4 million. And they're always, and Mom, if you're listening, I love you to pieces, you're amazing. But like, she'll tell me like, you'll not believe how much, and I'm like, Mom, you're crying, but you're crying all the way to the bank. And I took a poll, and no one feels sorry for you. I can keep asking, but I think that's, it's like, wipe the little tears away. So in Austin and all the markets, obviously this is happening. It's an exciting time. Now, somehow with only 1,700 active listings the same time last year, Austin eked out a 2.5% increase in sales. Now, I don't think Austin will be able to do that in 2022. I'll be thrilled if it's flat, but those average prices probably going to be up in that 20% range year over year. So I wanted to leave you guys with that forecast as we go into the second half of 2022. And